The first time it happens, it doesn't feel real. You wake up, open your dashboard, and there it is. A claim, maybe even a strike, sitting quietly on your screen like a warning you never saw coming. And in that moment, everything slows down. Because the same video you felt proud of just hours ago is now under question. Its fate no longer entirely in your hands. And suddenly the excitement of creation is replaced by a heavy realization. This system you stepped into has rules you didn't fully understand, and now you're experiencing them not as theory, but as consequence. What makes it more unsettling is how fast it happens. Because in your mind, you uploaded a video. But in reality, the moment you hit publish, your content entered a network of automated checks. Scanning systems like Content ID that don't watch your video the way a human does. They analyze it, break it down into patterns, compare it against massive databases of copyrighted material, and within seconds they can detect matches you didn't even think were significant. And just like that, your video is flagged, claimed, or sometimes even blocked before it gets the chance to breathe. And this is where the real misunderstanding begins to unfold, because most beginners think a claim means you did something wrong. But that's not always true. Sometimes it simply means your video contains copyrighted material that someone else owns, and now they've chosen what happens next. They might monetize it, track it, or restrict it. And while that might feel unfair, it's actually part of how the system is designed, because ownership gives control. And control doesn't always align with your intentions. But then comes the deeper layer, the difference between a claim and a strike. Something that looks similar on the surface but carries completely different weight, because a claim is like a warning sign, a reminder that your content includes protected material, while a strike is a direct penalty, a signal that your content violated copyright rules in a more serious way. And understanding this difference is critical, because one can be managed, the other can escalate quickly if ignored. Now imagine the internal conflict. You believe your video falls under fair use, you added commentary, you transformed the content, you genuinely feel it's different enough, but the system doesn't automatically agree, and now you're faced with a decision. Do you accept the claim and move on, or do you dispute it and defend your work? And that choice isn't just technical, it's psychological. Because disputing means stepping into a process where you're essentially saying, I stand by this, and for many beginners, that moment feels intimidating. And here's the part most people don't talk about. When you dispute a claim, you're not arguing with YouTube, you're communicating with the copyright owner, the person or company that holds the rights to the content you used, and they get to review your explanation, decide whether they agree, and respond accordingly. And that means your justification has to be clear, strong, and rooted in actual transformation, not just effort or intention. This is where fair use becomes less of a concept and more of a strategy, because now you start to see why every decision you made during editing matters, why your commentary needed to be meaningful, why your additions needed to shift the viewer's experience, because in a dispute, vague explanations don't hold up. What matters is whether your content can stand as something new, something that doesn't replace the original, but builds on it in a way that serves a different purpose. And yet, even when you do everything right, there's still uncertainty, because fair use isn't a guaranteed outcome, it's a case-by-case judgment. And that unpredictability is what makes it both powerful and risky. Because you can have two similar videos with different outcomes depending on how they're perceived. And that's why experienced creators don't rely on luck. They rely on understanding patterns, studying what works, and refining their approach over time. There's also a hidden lesson in all of this. That the safest path isn't to avoid using content entirely, but to reduce dependency on it. To build your voice strong enough that the borrowed material becomes secondary, not central. Because the more your content relies on what's already being created, the more vulnerable it becomes. But when your perspective, your analysis, your storytelling takes the lead, the balance shifts in your favor. And as you move through this experience, something starts to change. The fear begins to turn into awareness, the confusion into clarity, because now you're not just uploading blindly, you're thinking critically, you're asking the right questions before you even start editing, you're considering not just what looks good, but what makes sense within the system, and that shift is where real growth begins. Because the truth is, every creator who succeeds in this space has faced this moment at least once. That first claim, that first challenge, that first realization that creativity alone isn't enough. And the ones who last are the ones who learn from it, who adapt, who evolve, and who begin to see fair use not as a barrier, but as a framework, a set of boundaries that, when understood properly, don't limit creativity. They refine it, and maybe that's the turning point. When you stop seeing the system as something that's against you and start seeing it as something you can navigate, something you can work within, something you can even use to your advantage. Because once you understand how it thinks, how it reacts, how it evaluates content, you're no longer guessing. You're creating with intention, and that's when the game truly begins to change.